Hi, I'm Chris Higa, product developer for the Mini LMT, and today we're going to be installing some of the option parts. Today we're going to focus on pretty much the upper half of the chassis, doing all of the chassis braces. So the tools you're going to need for this, you're going to need a 1.5 and 2 millimeter hex driver. A 4 millimeter nut driver is preferred, but you can use the multi-tool and the 5 millimeter nut driver. They just tend to make things a little easier, and a pair of long reach needle nose pliers. So to start, we're actually going to start by opening up the body. And if your battery is in the vehicle, you're going to want to remove your battery. And the easiest way to get to a lot of these cross braces, at least underneath near the transmission, is we're actually going to remove the battery tray and the 2-in-1 tray. So to start there, you're going to take your 1.5 millimeter. In the back of the chassis, you have, for the back of the battery tray, you have one screw here and on each side, and then you have two along the top that actually go into the ESC tray. The ESC tray has two screws here that are on the front part of the lower cage mount, and you have two of these on each side. When you remove those, you'll be able to get the ESC tray out. If you're going to, since we're taking these both out at the same time, you can actually leave the two bolts here together that connect the ESC tray and battery tray and remove it as one piece. It'll save you a couple extra screws that you don't have to take in or out. So when those come out, you can actually lift the ESC tray out of the way. You can disconnect the servo from the plug here, and that gives you access to the top. So now you can see most of the chassis braces. So you have the top brace here, the two lower ones, and then we're going to be replacing the ones on the shock tower here. So the first braces are that we're going to do is we're going to work on the front half of the vehicle. So you have these come in a pair. These are your upper shock mount braces, and then you have the lower transmission braces. So we're actually going to have one of each of these. So to remove the upper shock mount brace, you're going to remove the upper shock mount screw, and be sure when you do this, if you're not real familiar with the car yet, kind of place them in an order in which when you take them off, so you know what parts go back together and where they go. So you can see here, they're really small, but this is the actually shock mount bushing. So there's a front and rear piece cap. So you want to make sure that you don't lose those when you take them out. So with the shocks removed, you now have access to the 4 screws that hold the upper shock mounts in place. So you're going to now remove the screws for the upper shock mounts. And the shock mount might be, when you pull it out, the upper shock mount might be a little bit tight in the chassis just because of the powder coat. So as we do this other side, you'll probably get a better view of it. So once you get those out, you have this is the stock piece comes out. So you can see here, it's a little bit tight, so you got to give it a little bit of wiggle to get it out. While this is out, we're actually going to take the lower brace out here. In this, the screws are a little bit hard to see, but they're below the 4-link mount here, so you're seeing you're going to actually have to take off the Lexan side plates to access the screw head. So see here, you were able, 2 little screws, and you're able to remove the lower plate, and then you'll have 2 screws right next to each other. So one that's in the lower mount of the cage, and then you'll see a flathead screw mounted right next to it. On the opposite side, the lower piece is a little bit bigger. So there's 3 screws that you have to take out. One here, one right below the motor, and one right back by the bottom of the header. And that will allow you to get that sponsor plate off. So now, same thing, we're going to remove the screw here. And the reason we do this is it allows us to be able to, when we take this all apart, it allows us to flex the chassis plates a little bit to get these braces in and out without having to fully disassemble the entire vehicle. When you do take those screws out, the brace may start to spin, so you may have to put your finger on top and hold the brace in place so you can get the screw out. So now with that out, this is where we can take our handy dandy pliers and fish our brace out. So with the lower brace out, now we're going to replace that with the metal piece. So it's going to go, sometimes depending on the size of your fingers, you can either go from the top or the bottom, because this mount does go below the 4-link bars. So it's kind of hard to see, but it's right above the, I don't know how the best way to show it here is, you're going to see inside, underneath the 4-link mount, above the drive shaft, you're going to slide it in, and it kind of slides into the middle to try and line up into those holes. I'm actually going to need to take my glasses off so I can see this and try and line up the hole here. So now we're going to put the screw in on the other side. I like to put the flathead ones in first once I get it to kind of locate that plate, that brace in place. 2 holes, so make sure that you're lining it up correctly so that it's going in the back hole of the brace, so you still have access to the front hole when you go to put your button head screw back in. So now with those in, you can take your button head screw through the lower cage mount, through the chassis, and into the metal brace. Metal to metal parts, generally we're going to want to use some thread lock, but these screws are very, very small. So if you use thread lock, you have to be very, very conscious of not putting too much thread lock into these screws. Otherwise, they're very difficult to get out. So once that lower brace is in, then I go and I snug up all the other screws. Now we're going to take our shock mount brace and we're going to put that in. So the stock holes on these, if you're going to remain using the stock upper mounts, you notice there is a left and right side of these. The way you can tell the left and right side is that you'll have a buildup on the back of the mount where the screw goes in and threads into. So you want to make sure that's going towards the center of the vehicle. All right, so now we're going to, with all this back in place, we're now going to reinstall the shocks. So you take your shock bushing, and then there is a small shock cap for the bushing. You'll see that there is, hard to tell if I hold it up, but there's one side that's open that will key itself into the mount itself. Put this back in. So once you get it in, you're going to want to kind of get it into the shock mount. That'll hold the bushing in place. and then kind of line up the screw, go through and thread it in. We can also now, since we're pretty much done with the front, we can reinstall the lower sponsor plate. So that goes back in, and then just the 2 screws here, right next to the transmission. And these screws, the chassis is tapped for these screws, so there's no nut behind them. So you just thread them in, hand tight, and there you go. So for the back, when we now move to the back section, it's very similar to the front, but to make it easier, we're actually going to take the 2 bolts off, and we're actually going to take the cage off. So you need to take your 2mm driver. Actually, no, sorry, it still is a 1 now. It's a 2.5mm screw. It still uses the same 1.5mm driver. But you notice the 2 screws that hold on this, the cage, are actually slightly larger. So we're going to continue here to take the shocks off, just like we did on the front half. That's going to actually give me a little easier access to pull this body away for right now. Because once I do that, I'll be able to take out that cross brace. Normally I would just cut the zip tie and then re-zip tie it later, but I apparently did not bring a pair of side cutters in here. So now that we've pulled the shocks off, we're going to same thing. We're going to pull the upper shock mounts off right now. This is just going so that I can get the body out of the way a little better. I try to keep these screws together so you know where they go when you assemble everything back together. So now we got that brace out, this out. We probably should have done this sooner, but we're doing it now. So there is a zip tie that's holding the wire for the lights through the cage. So we're just gonna take you can take some Lexan scissors or some snips, and we're just gonna cut this here so we can disconnect it. Now you can actually completely remove the body, so it's now out of the way for you to work on the vehicle. So here we're now going to remove the wheelie bar, and we're going to be replacing that with the wheelie bump. You'll have the 2 screws that were here and here on this that attach the cage, and then you're going to have 2 more on the bottom, which is here and here right below that on each side, that you'll remove to get the wheelie bar off. And this part is actually is an important step for when we replace the upper cage mount a little bit, because sometimes we need to loosen a few of these outside bolts to be able to flex the chassis, because the upper cage brace or chassis brace with this one actually has a locator spot in it. So if you look at this one, there's a locator pin on it, versus the one for the shocks, it's smooth. So that's an easy way to tell the difference between those braces. So you're removing the rear brace, which is this piece here. It's the same as the one in the front that locks the chassis down, and you have the wheelie bump. So what we're gonna do right now, while this is apart, we're actually going to disassemble the wheelie bump, because you're actually gonna need these 4 screws that are in the X brace here. So you're gonna need the screw here and here from each side, because we're gonna need those to assemble the new wheelie bump. All right, so now that we got the wheelie bump disassembled, you have 2 side plates, the X cross brace, and the actual wheelie bump bar itself. So when you are assembling the wheelie bump, there's actually a flag mount hole in the bottom of the bump. So when you mount these, that needs to be towards the end bottom open side of the brace. That will allow your flag to be mounted in the correct location. And those are just made with like a standard antenna tube, and then you can make a flag mount. So what you'll do is you'll get your wheelie bump put in place, and then you will get your wheelie bump and you're going to, the end hole on this side, because this is for the cross bracing. And then you will come into the top side here. And just begin to thread that in. Make sure you're not cross threading anything. So then you have the lower hole for that cross brace, screw goes in. Right, and then we're going to repeat that on the other side. Always leave it a little loose so that makes it easier for you to get the other part lined up, and then you snug and tighten them at the end. So the screw goes through, go to tighten it up. In the front, there's 2 braces. In the back, there's actually 3. So there's 1 extra brace. So you have the upper shock mount brace, which we used in the front, and this is the lower brace that goes above the drive shaft. The extra one that we talked about earlier is this one here that's got the location pin in it. So that replaces this one here. So we're going to actually remove both of those braces right now. So there's 2 screws here, which is starts with the end of the cage and the screw right next to it. So with these, 1 screw is a button head, the other's a flat head. So the button head screw is the one that goes through the cage, the lower section of the cage. The flat head is flat into the chassis. Because this chassis has a locator in it, you may have to loosen these. You should be able to sit there. You should be able to pull enough to get enough flex out of the chassis to get this brace out. So we're also now going to remove the lower sponsor plate on this side, on the other side of the gearbox. Just like we did on the front side, there's 2 screws. These are really short, so let's try not to lose those ones. These screws are a little bit hard to see because they're behind the collective header and then the lower cage mount bolt here. So we're going to remove those 2 screws. I always have my little handy dandy pliers here helpful. Just sometimes it's easier to grab the screw head with a pair of pliers. We're just going to repeat that step on the same screws on this side. And the sponsor plate on the right, on the left side of the truck, we'd already removed in the front section. So here you can see, I didn't show it, you have a little bit better view on this side. Like I said, sometimes when you're taking this off, once you take all the screws out, this brace will move. So sometimes you have to take your finger, just put it on here so you can hold it in place so that you can get the screw out. So now we have our lower mount out. So with all those out, we're going to take our aluminum piece. We're going to start with the lower mount. Same thing as we're going to come in. I usually come in from the back side of the chassis here and just use the upper four-link bars and the axle, the drive shaft, to help me line these things up. So this is a little bit of a trick sometimes to get this lined up. So I'm using the wrench to help just kind of slowly guide it into place to where I can get one of the screws in. I was able to get the flathead one started, and then to keep that section from rotating, we're actually going to take that front button head screw and go through the cage, and we're going to try and get that one lined up, because once you get that second one in, that will actually help to keep the part from rotating, and it'll make it easier to line up on the other side. So with this screw, you have to kind of move the header out of the way a little bit, just to get good access to that screw and straight shot. Then it goes right in. When you tighten this lower piece down, the aluminum is quite a bit stiffer than the composite plastic piece. So you're gonna want to take one side of these. You don't have to take them out. I would just loosen them, you know, about halfway. This will allow you some movement in the chassis when we go to put. Allows us to have some separation and movement in this chassis piece. So when we put this brace in, if you notice, there is behind this is a larger hole, and that's the locator pin for this side of the brace. So when you put it in, you're going to want to set the locator, and then you're going to need to pull on the chassis a little bit to get it to line in, and then you're going to want to rotate it into place. So now we're going to set the first one in here. So same thing, turn around, you've got screw here. All right, so now that we've got those braces in, we can now go back to putting in, we're gonna now work on the wheelie bump. So the wheelie bump has the center brace here that you removed. If you look at this brace, the way you tell the top is the top of this has a bevel for where the bow tie will go through it. So you'll put that back in, and you're going to grab your four screws here, and it starts in this end hole here. And I always put one of these holes in, and just to try and help locate everything before I put this brace in, because it's easier for me to try and find the little holes here. Be sure that you tighten the screws that we loosened from the earlier brace. Make sure when you do put everything back together that you have all the screws that you loosened up re-tightened. The end of the cross brace section, we've got one more brace to put in, which is our shock brace. So we're putting this back, and we're using the same middle holes that we were using. So locate your upper shock mounts, make sure that the side with material, which that's what's going to lock the screw in, is towards the center of the chassis. All right, so once those are tight, now we're going to put the shocks back in. So shock bushing, the shock bushing cap at the end. And once again, just go through and tighten this up. These are really small screws, so I always tell people to kind of use just 2 fingers when you're tightening things. That way you're not trying to over tighten. You don't want to grab the wrench with your whole hand here. Now we're actually going to finish. So with most of this stuff off, we're going to now also just kind of do a little bit of button-up work. We're going to put our sponsor panels back on. And those screws just tap the chassis threaded, so they just screw right back in. All right, now we're going to put the radio tray and back in. All right, because we remove the body, we want to make sure that we, before we put the radio tray in, we run the wire underneath the shock brace, and it's going to kind of go underneath the tower here. And we're going to plug this back into our 2-in-1. You'll see positive, negative, so the black wire goes to the outside of the case here when you plug it in. But this will allow us to keep the wiring nice and tidy inside as we put it back inside the the vehicle. So the motor wires run down the center here. You kind of line them up down the center, and you're going to a little bit hold them in place when doing this. Actually, on this side of the vehicle for the motor, there's a motor ferrite ring, and that's got to, you want to get that to go underneath the battery tray. Take your button head screws, and we're going to put these, start putting these back in place. And while you're doing this, you want to make sure that you're watching the wires, that you're not pinching any wires in between the chassis or any of the parts. Oops, not lined up right here. So we've got our servo wire here. And you want to make sure that you plug your servo back into your 2-in-1. So you have steering. Mount the body. So there's the two screws here. These were pretty much the only ones that are different size pitch thread. So these are actually a 2.5 millimeter screw versus a 2 millimeter screw. But once you get the body lined up, sometimes tilting the body up is going to help you to line these screw holes up just a hair. All right, so now we got these screws lined up, and we can tighten these up here. So now you can have equal wheelie this way and that way. If you want to learn more tips and tricks about the Mini LMT, you can check Losi's YouTube channel. Follow up for more videos there. We'll see you on the next one.